It's a popular and proud belief in many Indian Christian communities that one of Jesus' original disciples, Thomas, came to India, preached Christianity, and was eventually killed in Chennai, where his tomb supposedly lies today. But is it actually true? Or is it a legend that developed over centuries? Let's examine the evidence to honestly explore the truth behind a claim that many assume to be historical. So first things first, where does this story even come from? The Bible itself is completely silent about Thomas traveling to India. The only ancient Christian text that tells this story is the Acts of Thomas, written in Syria around the 3rd century CE, after the time of Jesus. But here is the key point. The Acts of Thomas is not part of the Bible, and it is rejected by mainstream Christianity as a heretical or apocryphal text. It was never accepted into the canon by Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox churches. More importantly, this book, The Acts of Thomas, is filled with fantastical magical stories. So the Thomas in India story comes from one single source written centuries after the fact and filled with myth, not history. Because this is the only Christian source claiming that Thomas came to India, and because it's so clearly fictional in nature, that is itself strong evidence that the story must not be historically true. Given that even the stories in the Bible itself are unreliable or filled with contradictions, it's highly unreasonable for Christians to believe a story that's not even in the Bible, especially one that comes from a text like the Acts of Thomas, which was rejected by mainstream Christianity as heretical and filled with fantasy. When the only source is a rejected magical tale and not even scripture, it should raise serious doubts about its truth. Let's now turn to the famous Santom Basilica in Chennai, often claimed to be built over Thomas's actual tomb. In Chennai, formerly Madras, there is a famous church, the Santom Basilica, said to be built over the tomb of Thomas. But here's what history shows. There is no record of this tomb before the 16th century when the Portuguese arrived in India. The Portuguese colonizers claimed to discover Thomas's tomb and built a church there. But there is no archaeological or documentary evidence that the site was known as Thomas's burial place in ancient times. In fact, a much older tradition claims that Thomas's bones were moved to Edessa in modern-day Turkey in the 4th century CE, a claim that contradicts the Chennai tomb story entirely. Let's dig deeper into how this story grew, especially in Kerala, home to India's oldest Christian community. How the myth took root. The oldest Christian community in India is found in Kerala, known as the St. Thomas Christians or Nazarenes. They trace their origins to the supposed arrival of Thomas in Kerala in 52 CE, claiming he established 7 or 8 churches there. But there is no historical or archaeological evidence for this claim. The earliest signs of Christian presence in Kerala appear much later, from around the 6th to 10th centuries. The story likely arrived with Syrian Christian migrants who brought traditions from West Asia, including the Acts of Thomas legend, and adapted it to the Malabar context. Over time, the story became a source of community pride, portraying Indian Christianity as ancient and independent from European influence. When the Portuguese arrived in the 16th century, they encountered this tradition and embraced it eagerly, promoting the Thomas legend to support their missionary and colonial goals. Thus, a symbolic, non-biblical tale grew into a powerful religious and regional identity, despite its lack of factual support. So where does all this leave us? What do serious scholars and historians say today? Most independent historians and even many Christian scholars agree that the story of Thomas coming to India is not supported by reliable historical evidence. It likely began as a symbolic tale in Syrian Christian circles and over time got localized and promoted in India, especially during the colonial era. The tomb story was amplified by European missionaries to give their work deeper roots in Indian soil. So let's be clear. Why this matters to all Indians? India is home to many religious traditions, and it's natural that myths and legends form part of our identities. But truth matters too. If we accept legend as fact, we risk misreading our past, and we make it harder to build a society based on truth, reason, and honest history. This is not about one religion. Every religion has myths that are later treated as facts. The question is, are we willing to re-examine them honestly? So now we know the story of Apostle Thomas in India comes from a rejected text written centuries after Jesus, full of miracles and metaphors, not reliable history. The tomb in Chennai was discovered only after the Portuguese arrived, with no ancient evidence to support it. And the Kerala tradition, while important to community identity, rests on later religious storytelling, not eyewitnesses' history. Believing something because it's familiar doesn't make it true, but questioning with sincerity, that's how truth begins. So the claim that Apostle Thomas came to India and was buried in Chennai is not a historical fact. It is a later religious legend with no basis in reliable evidence.